a series of talks by Prof.Sthaneshwar and Timalsina. There is one that H extra in the name, so it is Timalsina.
I didn't have H.
Yes.
I'm H-less.
Uttarakhand, so Sina. And greetings for all teachers. Today is Guru Purnima, the Purnima, celebrated as Teachers' Day originally, and of course we know that popular September 5th. So greetings to all of you. So, Upanishad defines tapas or penance, tapasya. Very interesting. It says Swadhyaya to Pravachana as tapas. Self-study and teaching. Swadhyaya to Pravachana. Yeah. So, it is Maudgalya. So, if all those involved in this study and teaching processes, greetings for all. Yesterday we had initial thoughts on this topic, dynamism of being, semantic structure of time and freedom. Professor made the initial remarks and then there was some engaging discussion. And we have shared the book. This is a Bloomsbury series on Eastern philosophies. Pirated version we shared with many of you silently. And so, furthering this discussion today, he is now officially appointed as a visiting professor at our center. JNU has appointed him for a few years. And, we always we are grateful, thankful to those professors who are part of the center, and of course, when there is no financial burden, we appreciate it more. And there is international, faculty says that minus the financial burden and available. Thank you very much, Professor. And Professor Anandam Chakravarti would spend a week in December first week with us. We have a philosophy retreat by 5 series of lectures, which he is planning somewhere in the first week of December. So, with these, and also welcoming Professor Sachchidanand Mishra, both from Sampurnananda Sanskrit Vishwavidyalaya, Varanasi, and scholars in their own fields. Thank you, for your time, particularly, given the kind of the political scenario, you were still able to find time, spend yesterday. Also, you were here. Thank you, Professor, for your time and chairing this session. We will start with your, the second lecture, then probably will, then you can respond. Yeah, before that, we have, you may give us the titles of those Sanskrit versions. This is books in Sanskrit. All his publications generally are English publications, but these are the works recently all in Sanskrit. So you would, probably give in to those bundles of books in Sanskrit, because that's as part of the schools of Indian philosophy, writing works in Sanskrit has dwindled. Literally, it's almost nil. And Sachchidanand Mishra championed with Charvaka, Karikavali, Navacharvaka, Karikavali, and recently with Vibhrama Viveka. And Timalsina also, being adepts in Sanskrit and again in English, that's a good combination. And we liked yesterday's comment that every taxi driver knows English in America. If you know Sanskrit, if you know German, if you know the languages, there's a value addition. You can explain us those words and then we'll go ahead.
Thank you. Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnanandana Salakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. भारतीय परंपरा और आधुनिक ज्ञान परंपरा में एक छोटा विभेद है। मैं कम से कम 25 साल से अमेरिका में पढ़ा रहा हूँ, मेरा कर्म उधर भूमि था। तो जो वहाँ आते हैं और मॉडर्न यूनिवर्सिटी हमने उन्हीं लोगों के हिसाब से हूबहू यहाँ भी कॉपी कर लिया है। और यहाँ भी जो प्रोफेसर्स होते हैं उनके यहाँ हम जाते हैं, हम इन्फॉर्म्ड होने के लिए, वेल इन्फॉर्म्ड सिटीजन होने के लिए जाते हैं। इसके लिए नहीं जाते हैं कि हम ट्रांसफॉर्म्ड हो जाएं, वो हमको छू पाए, हमारे अंदर आ जाए, हमारे जो सब्जेक्टिव कोर है उसको हिला पाए। हम तटस्थ रहकर वो विषय को बाहर से देखना चाहते हैं। ये सब्जेक्ट और ऑब्जेक्ट का डिवाइड जो है ज्ञान परंपरा में भी आता है। जो कार्टेशियन ड्यूअलिज्म का जो स्ट्रक्चर है वो इस पर भी आता है। एक गुरु गाय के 4 पैर हैं बताने के लिए नहीं होता है। ये जो गुरु तत्व है वो हमको परिवर्तित करने के लिए होता है। एक ज्ञान होता है जैसे कि आप अंधेरे में पैर डालने वाले थे और किसी ने बोल दिया सांप, आप तपाक से पैर हटा लिए। ये जो आदमी सांप चिल्लाया, आप ये नहीं बताते हैं मुझे इंफॉर्मेशन आ गया। आपके एक्शन के लिए वो ज्ञान होता है। सा विद्या या विमुक्ति, मुक्ति का मतलब हमने मिस्टिकल कर दिया। ये आजकल की बात नहीं है, लिबरेशन है, मोक्ष है, अज्ञान से मोक्ष होना। हमारे कई अज्ञान होते हैं, उन सब से मुक्त होना। तो मैं एक भारतीय होने के नाते आप सबको ये कहना चाहूँगा कि यूनिवर्सिटी में है, हमारे प्रोफेसर्स भी हैं, तो वो हमको थोड़ा ट्रांसफॉर्म भी कर पाए तो कुछ बिगड़ेगा नहीं। बाहर से तो आजकल हम बहुत इन्फॉर्म्ड होते हैं, दिल में बुद्धू के बुद्धू ही रह जाते हैं। इसलिए क्या होता है कि इतने बड़े बड़े ज्ञान, इतने बड़े बड़े दर्शन लेकर भी आदमी बहुत घटिया काम करके चलता है। इतनी हिंसा होती है, इतना भेद होता है, क्योंकि हमने ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन को छोड़ दिया है, इंफॉर्मेशन को पकड़ा है। मैं इस पर लेक्चर नहीं दूंगा ज़्यादा, आप सबने सुन लिया मेरी बात, क्योंकि ये मेरे गुरु 3 गुरु लोग हैं। आज गुरु पूर्णिमा है। मेरा सौभाग्य है कि मैं अमेरिका में रहते हुए भी थोड़ा इनको जेलस भी करना चाहता हूँ कि हम वहाँ बैठकर संस्कृत में शास्त्र करते हैं, आप लोग क्या करते हो। तो इसलिए मैं थोड़ा ये उपहार करना चाहूँगा। एक तो कम से कम आप भी लोग बोल दें, गुरुदेव आज सौभाग्य मिला। तो कम से कम ये तो बोल दे, मेरे पास इतना तो है नहीं। गुरुवे नमः। कई तो हैं छोटे छोटे हैं, ऐसा करते हैं कोई संस्कृत में बहुत कम शब्द में बहुत ज्यादा लिखा जा सकता है। हम उसको सूत्र बोलते हैं। वसुबंधु एक दार्शनिक थे 4th सेंचुरी में, उन्होंने 20 कारिका में जो फिलॉसफी बना दिया। डिमिशिका जो है विज्ञप्ति मात्रता, वो मूल है। बाद में उन्होंने 30 कारिका के दूसरी किताब भी लिख दी, एक फिलॉसफी हो गया। मैंने शिवबोध विमशिका उसी के कॉपी करते हुए जितना एसेंशियल चीज उसके आधार पर बन सकता है। जो मैं विमर्श करता हूँ उनमें 8 पैरेलल स्टडी ग्रुप्स अभी ये विमर्शिका पर चल रहा है। तो छोड़िए, this is all I have to say about these Sanskrit writings. My point is, yes, we have one advantage in the world. When I come to these scholars in America, they know one language, and then the maximum is they will say they know French also or German also. I mean, how is that different from English? Meaning, is there some such unique knowledge that has never been communicated across these German or French or English languages? So any educated Indian today in the world will have 3 or 4 languages. Imagine the wealth we have. Thank you so much. So yesterday, Professor just mentioned one concept and then left. That was pratyahara. That was a Paninian concept. The first letter and the last letter. And combined, we have a pratyahara. So what is this pratyahara? Yesterday, I read the first paragraph of the book with you, and then we started the conversation. So following the pratyahara system, I would like to read the last paragraph of the book, and then continue with the conversation. So here, the last chapter relates to life, how being, time, freedom, everything makes sense only if there is life. Only if this being is embodied. So on this backdrop comes the last paragraph. In life, being discovers itself, finds its teleology, and through life, time lives. It is also in life that the dynamism of being is directly encountered. Life constantly renews itself, the dynamism you can see. And in these modes of renewal, creativity finds its way. The metaphoric commingling, the samarasya of Shiva and Shakti in the Trika paradigm helps us explain the absolute commingling of consciousness and materiality. Life as a fusion is yet another metaphor to explain the dichotomous nature of the world, but the dichotomy in terms of being and becoming, materiality and consciousness, creativity and subjectivity is possible only on the foundation of life itself. If the absolute actualizes itself through the modes of the manifold, this actualization is happening in the modes of living. The absolute in these accounts is dynamic, or dynamism explains the inner fabric of being as such. Succession and simultaneity, time and being are all the very essential nature, swabhava of what is. And if the world is an expression of freedom, recognition of the self as pulsating through the pulsation of the totality, recognition of the self as creative unfolding in the modes of self-expression, and finding oneself within temporal horizons, seeking to liberate oneself while constituting temporal succession are within the scope of freedom that constitutes the core of being as being. Our freedom lies not in dichotomous power play, but in recognition of singularity, in recognizing the rhythm or the vibrations that constitute the world as one with one's own pulsation. At this juncture, I would like to borrow a word, chiasm. Its intersections are coming together from Maurice Merleau-Ponty. Maurice Merleau-Ponty's 2 books are absolute read: The Phenomenology of Perception and Visible and Invisible. Invisible and invisible in particular, Merleau-Ponty is very clear in the dynamism of being. And I'm not saying the way I understand being is identical to what Merleau-Ponty has to say. But there's a big convergence, and I think that I have found a way to actually have an understanding, a dialogue, without reducing to absolute to materiality or to inertia. And what it is. For example, what is the body? For Merleau-Ponty, the flesh is not just the clinical flesh. The body is an organ, is in dialogue or a constant unfolding of the nature. So there is not the world as a separate from the body. The body is constantly in dialogue with the nature. So this consciousness that we embody, the being lived within us, is integral to the nature itself. So we can explain this biologically that, for example, my eyes, my retina, is evolved in relation to the nature that I live in. J.J. Gibson, another philosopher who has written on perception, you might like to read it for more analysis on the ecology of perception, for that matter. But going further, how the concepts of subjectivity and objectivity are not something to diametrically oppose. Merleau-Ponty gives an example of touching the hand. It's very easy, simple exercise. I'm not asking you to touch anybody. Let's do one simple meditation. Please touch your hands. We all do namaste. There is no cultural barrier here. So let's all do namaskara. So in this touching, now because you have two hands, can you channel your own subjectivity to your right hand and touch your left palm? Right palm is touching the left palm. Let's touch our left palm with the right. Now, who is the subject? The right hand is the subject. Who is the object? The left hand is the object. Give it a break. Take a minute. Let's switch to our left palm. I want to use my left palm to touch like a scratch. I'm feeling itchy on my right palm. Let me use my left hand fingers to scratch my right hand palm. Now, the subject is the left hand and the object is the left hand. This whole Cartesian drama of the chasm between subject and object, it is so flimsy that Merleau-Ponty shattered in 1 second in one simple example. Now, one more example for the field of perception, that now you are seeing me. When you are seeing me, I am the focal point of your gaze, but you are also seeing me against a backdrop. There's the wall. There's the space behind me or surrounding. There's a frame. Every perception, like you see a house on the hill, that's Merleau-Ponty's example. In that perception, there is the dual perception, the object and the backdrop, the space. So, how perception unfolds is a very interesting case, because this perception, we assume, is foundational to establish a dualism between Drit and Drishya. I have one paper on the phenomenology of meditation, and that is where I have used Edmund Husserl's model of phenomenological reduction to analyze the Drishya Viveka of Vidyaranya. So, there is so much of phenomenology that we can do to understand many of these maxims we are doing. Professor Nataraju also does phenomenology, and so what I'm finding interesting here is these concepts allow us to move beyond the ground, the Cartesian ground of what is a presumed dichotomy between subject and object. And I need that very much to continue the conversation further, that this life living is such that I am, as the body, is both the subject and the object. I feel it. I can see other objects, your object body, but I can recognize each body as subject body. That is the only way I can acknowledge intersubjectivity. I cannot acknowledge your intersubjective space without first recognizing your physical presence in space and time, your corporeality. But what is your corporeality? It's a 2 billion years of or plus history of how each and every cell has evolved in a way that the totality of the body is sentient, not just having life, breathing prana, but being conscious, in the sense that there is no part in my body that would lack some type of sensation. So it's not just the retina reflecting objects remotely, it is the tactile sensation. Merleau-Ponty makes touch foundational, and that's what our cognitive research also suggests, that the first of all the sensations is the sense of touch. And touch is so central to us that every part of our body, the totality, has this sensation of touching. I can't hear from my toe, but I can't see with my ears, but as far as the tactile sensation goes, that envelops the totality. This, I would say, is the first premise of prana and transcending the materiality versus sentience consciousness paradigm. I was looking for, actually in this chapter, I seek counseling to these scholars, so that I'm looking for the philosophy of biology from Indian perspective. And this last chapter is dedicated to my effort to constitute or give a framework for the philosophy of life, philosophy of biology, I mean. And for that, I don't have too many references. In the beginning, I thought I'll read Charaka and Sushruta and so on, and actually nothing helped. And they will guide me, they will help me find something more, I'm pretty sure about it. But one word, just like yesterday, concept of Swatantra blew my mind, and the entirety of the work unfolded on Helaraja's simple word. I have the same thing here to address life. There was one great scholar, we have lost maybe his work. There's one tiny Vritti available, or maybe he was also the author of Spanda book itself. The scholar is named Atta Kallata, again a Kashmiri. I told him yesterday I prefer that. So he just said, I found one phrase from him, Prak Sambit Prane Parinata. First, consciousness transforms into life, prana, vibrancy, pulsation, or breath. Prana is sometimes understood as breath. So the model here, we are told that physicalism has answer to all our problems, and that's a scientific perspective, and that may be the case, I don't know. But if you read two books, I'd like to guide you to read two books. One is Objections to Physicalism, and the other is Waning of Materialism. After reading these two books, my superstition that the physicalists have actually found a better answer to many of the things that we could not address, that delusion is resolved. So they are also telling us that they have so many answers, and I know I have to face the wrath of Sachchidanand because he has been working on it. And actually, the way I had to read Sachchidanand because this on Pashupata Shastra, what I did, I asked my colleagues to collect at least 20 sample arguments from physicalism so that I could dress in a polemical, classical way. And the first chapter that's exactly what I have done there. So please go, let's start this classical mode of rethinking, not like going back and to the Stone Age, but going forward, but not negating what we have as our asset, as our heritage. So, what would it mean? How could there be the primacy of consciousness? Consciousness is an emergent property. We know that. Daniel Dennett knows that. John Searle knows that. All the great philosophers know that. But not so fast. There are so many other philosophers. David Chalmers is a good name to cite now. He does not think that is the way it is. And there's like panpsychism is a competing model right now. It cannot be simply negated. You have to read many of their arguments, and not that I adhere to them. There is cosmopsychism. Some of our colleagues are arguing for a collective cosmopsychism, and that has been a norm. They could simply say Brahman, and no, they can't use the word. That sounds too Hindu, but let's make one word anyway. So cosmopsychism, and so they have also given the scholars, the philosophers who are arguing from the cosmopsychism, they also have some solid points to make. I would like to scroll up to the beginning of this chapter, and if you have the book with you, I would like that very much that we read rather than yesterday where I just simply went offline, but today I would like to read a few sentences that I have translated or I have endeavored to translate from classical writers. So my hope is that if you are thinking that these Stone Age people had a zero understanding of rationality or rational ways of thinking, I hope if I can even make a slight dent in those presuppositions, then I will have succeeded and done my job. So, okay, hold on. So what we are saying, like page 210, I'm already gone there. I'm starting from the Upanishads. On earth, they spring up as rice and barley, plants and trees, sesame and beans, from which it is extremely difficult to get out. When someone eats that food and deposits the semen, from him one comes into being again. This is not arguing that my soul, spirit, whatever the random things we are talking about, is different from the lived, embodied, naturally evolving phenomenon. Plants are plants, you become subjects, you evolve into semen. So this book is not starting with the premise of the spirit being completely separated from the natural phenomenon. What does Brihadaranyaka say? This materiality, Mahadbhuta, is an endless and boundless mass of consciousness. This arises from the very material elements, Bhuta, and disappears back to them. So this is within it, my life, my consciousness, is integral to what exists as matter. So we are not summoning the ghost. We are not defending the ghost in order to argue for consciousness. The primacy of consciousness is not that. There's actually a giant philosopher, Malabadin, who cites the non-dual position of his time, and then he says, then if there is no difference, why are you even arguing that it arises everything from consciousness? Yet you could very well say that, but there cannot be agency. I cannot assume agency in inertia. That is the only reason I'm saying it starts from consciousness, or otherwise because it is the same. So there would not be, if I say the material inertia starts, then it would be not comprehensible because it cannot have an agency. And inertia cannot assume agency. So that's the only reason. So, but he's not saying these are two dichotomous categories. So that they are rejecting that dichotomy. So I'll rather move to find a little better position for explaining phenomenology, giving phenomenology, and for that I would rather like to go to Abhinavagupta, because in page 215, that's where I have one paragraph from Abhinavagupta, 215, and that's where the concept of time and then Kali and everything comes into play. Let's see. So, because immediately you see Kali and then, oh, this is now when the Hindus lack their rationality, The Western scholars generally think that way. Time is a determination of vitality, not my life. So, time is the determination of vitality in terms of succession and simultaneity. This is the very absolute consciousness that is manifesting within. This very manifestation is the power of the luminous consciousness identified as Kali. The manifestation of this very potency in differentiated form is the function of vitality in the forms of succession and simultaneity. The very consciousness assumes differentiated forms as the objects of cognition. And for this reason, space attains the form of the cognized in conjunction with delimiting factors. At this juncture, when the vitality in the form of life with the primacy of action flows towards and eagerly embraces the externals, it repletes the body with its fivefold forms, and thus body manifests as if conscious. Two words in hymns to prayers to Kali, two words are very critical for understanding the concept. One is Vyoma Vameshwari and another is Kala Sankarshi. So, how is this consciousness having subjectivity in a singular force or potency towards creativity? How is this recognized? Is Vyoma, space, Vameshwari, who vomits, who throws out, emits. This power within consciousness is what ejects space, makes space possible. And this is also Kala Sankarshini. Kala Grasam Karotyata. Kala Sankarshanat Kali Kala Grasam Karotyata. Because she swallows temporality, and that is why we call her Kali. What do we mean by her? That consciousness is where time dissolves. Edmund Husserl almost reached there when he argued in his Phenomenology of Consciousness Time in his book, or when he argued for time constituting consciousness. He just could not go beyond the stream of momentary flow, which would be accommodating Vasubandhu, not too much Abhinavagupta, a constant potency with the freedom, absolute freedom. But these two concepts, I would say, are interesting also in the metaphysical sense, that space and time are something that can be consumed. The sense of time, sense of succession can be stopped within being. And the sense perception of space can be emitted out, ejected or projected outside. And so consciousness then creates a dichotomy between the space that finds as a core within becoming subject and the ejected one becoming object. Subject and object is determined within the singular field where consciousness itself, when it separates the space or considers space as ejected, making that the external field, and then whatever remains at the core of the pole, the other pole becoming subject. What is there? There is no subject or object. Or there is both subject and object. Meaning, my own subjectivity arises contingent upon objectivity. I have no problem to accommodate dharmakirti and say sahopalamba niyama avedo nilatakhi. So we can very much argue, apply in the sense of the sahopalamba and then apply that to constituting subjectivity in relation to objectivity. But what would happen to my subjectivity if this is dependently arising? That's against Hindu philosophy. So the whole Buddhist criticism here would come to play also. And that helps us resolve also the criticism from the physicalist perspective, that what is the manifest subjectivity that we are arguing for is not at all the Atman that any of these philosophers are talking about. It is the ahamkara or I amness, the egoity, and that egoity is not the absolute core of being. It is never meant to be. It never was. It's only in conjunction with materiality that in Merleau-Pontian terminology, in chiasm, that we have the ahamkara, we have the egoity. And if the egoity dissolves, I do not see a philosophical crisis for the position that I'm upholding. So I go on a lot of conversation. So there's also, I ended up citing Sushruta. But let me skip this because I'm not a Sushruta expert, but I would rather cite Chairperson because I love him more. 218 page number, and that is where Chairperson has to say something on prana. Prana that has been explained as word of the character of reflexive cognizing and the non-differentiated state of all that is expressed and that which expresses. This very prana, whose generic form is vitality, prana, has the constructed form ascertained in the process of descending antecedent by manifestation of delimitation projected by its own autonomy. This is called prana for its orientation towards creation, visarga, or through penetrating antecedent by its own manifestation, or filling all that is emitted, visarga, which is of the form of creation or giving rise to externality through all the hollow channels. It fills within by seizing itself as it exceedingly resonates or reflexively cognizes both the states of resting as on oneself and grasping or cognizing the objects. This is being like reading the prayer hymns because in this speed we cannot read Chairperson. We have to just sit for one day and read one paragraph, like deeply meditate on it, and then we will get something out of it. So, but what it is, let's try to summarize it. I need to borrow let's borrow two words to explain the whole thing. One is a swabhava. From the get-go, I have been using the word. From chapter 1, I have been borrowing the word swabhava. There is something that is inherent to being. What is inherent to being? Its consciousness, luminosity is inherent to being. Sat is never separated from Chit. And this, if this is a Swabhava, there is something as it is. That this Swabhava comes in contrast to the Swabhava Shunyata, the core Nagarjunian criticism that nothing has its own intrinsic nature and everything is co-constituted. So I can give a series of objections to that, because my nature is to be angry only in relation to Sachchidanand annoying me. So that is my nature then, okay? So when well, I am not an angry person, but I'm only angry when he annoys. That is my nature. To be angry when somebody annoys, that's my nature. So they did not reject Swabhava by saying that only upon Parabhava that entities manifest. So Swabhava Shunyata only upon being dependent upon the factors. So do these factors have Swabhava? No. These factors also manifest such and so tropes only contingent upon other factors. Okay, that is their Swabhava. So I have found the objection to Swabhava argument ludicrous. And that goes to explain all the way through materialism as well. The another word is abhivakti. Recently I've written 2 papers, and in this book too I have suffusely used the vocabulary of abhivakti, manifestation of the tropes that are not there. One day I was reading Mahabharata to escape from philosophical books. A philosopher does not have an escape. Wherever you go, you end up finding philosophical concepts. And then I find the idea of consciousness again. Shantipa was reading, and then how the fire manifests from the log, like a dry log. And they were not saying consciousness is outside of the log being materiality. They are only saying that just like in the log is fire, does not manifest as long as conditions are met, the same way consciousness is suffused within materiality, does not manifest as long as conditions are met. This is what is the concept of abhivakti. So life is intrinsic to materiality. Life is not unique to planet Earth. That is what the scientists are looking for, what form of life we can explore elsewhere. Now maybe it started outside. If there is water, there must be life. So much of arguments I'm sure you are reading. And it's not like 2,000 years ago that we have to say that if there is no life described elsewhere, then there is no life described elsewhere, So it's we have gone beyond that era. So the whole world, entirety of time and space, is suffused with, I'm not saying life, but with the potentials for life. And through that potential of life, we also have next step the potential of the manifestation of subjectivity, given the same ecological process of the manifestation of subjectivity in contrast to or rejecting space and time, objectifying. When there is objectification, there is subjectification. It is a simultaneous process. So that's basically the essence I'm extracting from Kshemaraj. So there are so many lines, I don't know which one to read. Okay, I don't know if this is a good line, but I just like Adarasupally, therefore I like to read. That's justification. The power that is time, Shakti, Kalakya, the power that is time, identified as a succession, penetrates all entities that exist. On one hand, Helaraja had said time itself is freedom. And in here, what he said, it is power. And the power of successor. Because of freedom, you have the freedom. If every entity were to manifest simultaneously all the ways that it can manifest, there won't be any manifestation. Because when I was in the form of the sperm, and I would also need to be the old man and the young man and the boy and the professor and the son and the husband and every single possible manifestation simultaneously, there would be no manifestation. So therefore, this very freedom constitutes order. That is all that is there for temporality. Allowing freedom to unfold. The succession is not antithetical to. Therefore, what we are saying is, if there's freedom, then random things should happen. Randomness is not freedom. So what we are thinking about free will or freedom is like we should be able to do any random thing. Only then we will be free. No, this is the freedom that is allowing us agency and action in whatever the form that is possible at the given time. So now, while it is invisible, color, he's talking about color, invisible, it cannot be negated either, since it is felt. So this is why I chose this line, is bringing, Adarasupally brings the felt or embodied domain of temporality. Time is encapsulated in every cellular structure. There is autopoiesis and apoptosis. Every cell has its birth, a creation that again has the same process of subjectivity and objectivity. Every cell has to determine its core and retain its vitality, retain its being, its embodiedness, and then consider a boundary out of which is other. Just like you are outside of me, you are the other subject. Every cell has to have some sense of self-preservation in whatever the microbial, minimal, whatever form we say. It functions the same way. So me, as a living organism, is a trillion organisms living. My singularity is not in contradistinction to my plurality. This totality of plurality extends the same way. Now, where we go to like a Virupaksha Panchashika, another book, right? The Vishwa Ahanta or Purna Ahanta. So that the totality experiencing itself as I am. If you find that concept ludicrous, we should also find the very concept of me having this singular experience ridiculous. Because every cell has separate independent sensation, and we are having some type of collective sense to maintain this body, to maintain metabolism. Thus, even though every cell is also independently maintaining its own metabolism, then why can't we go into this collective body, and Merleau-Ponty would be okay to see this entirety of the nature as a singular body processing, subject-object dichotomy collapsed, a singular organism functioning. But we have a bundle of yogic things, so we need to be careful because, for Merleau-Ponty also, I think around the last chapter of Visible and Invisible talks on yoga, and which is, I regret, I wish he never talked about, because he had zero idea about yoga, and he's so stupid, and he thinks this yoga is about going inside the cave and dwelling, and then there comes a great philosopher who has absolutely no knowledge of what he's talking about. Anyway, vitality constitutes the dynamic world. Now, Abhinavagupta. Vitality constitutes the dynamic world, jagat of wakeful consciousness. Night corresponds to the resting mode of vitality, day and night, temporality. Okay, that there is just like two modes of resting and being active. Therein lies succession within consciousness that endures. Even when vitality rests in the cranial structure, Brahmavila. There are, okay, I think, let me read. There are infinite cycles of creation and dissolution in a single prana. Now you know that when you're breathing and all, it's happening in the cellular structure too. So every day you are killing, millions of cells. Don't go to gym ever if you want to be fully non-violent, because you are killing so many cells in the body. You want to teach a child, you can use, but not seriously. Right? Even this prana resides in cognition, and this rests in turn on the support upadhi, which rests on pure consciousness. This is what is called the emergence of time. Abhinavagupta is arguing here the sense of time, not in the metrified time, but in the sense of the lived time. How the sense of time or sense of temporality arises. A mere pulsation, what is that temporality? It's a pulsation of pure consciousness. Therefore, there is no contradiction in dreams and conceptualizations. So now, when the flow of vitality ceases and collapse of time is accomplished, the totality that shines forth is a singular awareness that is filled with complex potencies. The only difference in time is the differentiator in consciousness and not the difference in entities of cognition. Just as seeing collectively in a bird's eye view, literally the cognition of one watching from the top of a mountain, a moment is the duration of time of an instant of cognition. So now, like Vasubandhu's own understanding of Kshana, it's what did he mean by a moment. The Abhinava is also arguing of Kshana as the lived Kshana, like your Chitta Kshana, rather than the objective measurement. Even in the emergence of vitality, there's just one cognition in one emergence. This is the case, as otherwise there would not be a single conceptualization, because even the portions, matra, that are infused with words that are in sequence are also sequential. So we have words in sequence, we extract singular meaning, but then words are not words as blocks. Words themselves have phonemes. There's yet another succession. So, and maybe within phonemes, we can also conceive of subtle succession. So it's an infusion of succession and then constituting a sense. What does it mean for objectivity, for materiality? It's a mode of determination. In every mode of determination, what exists as fluid becomes determined and becomes an object. I'm talking almost in some quantum physicist vocabulary of whether it's wave or particle in terms of a mode of determination, that it's in the mode of determination that we find this fluid vitality as an object. Otherwise, everything is in the fluid, in the making, undetermined and undifferentiated. Only when there arises the sense of subjectivity, the object manifests, or object is determined in relation to the emergence of subjectivity. I just also wanted to check time, because I have these great scholars whom I owe time, so they get enough time to grasp everything I've said so far. So I'll soon stop so we can have a conversation, and I could have given more of the sense, but I just thought that we should read some of these lines from these esteemed acharyas, because every line they say can be developed into almost like a new philosophy. we just need to have the courage to rethink the framework. And that is where the whole idea of a moksha, that's where I'll stop, that's where the whole idea of a moksha comes. That's a emancipation from our presumed conceptual horizons, freedom from thoughts. So, as a philosopher, our objective should be to liberate ourselves from dogma. And all these conceptual realities are conceptual realities. And only when we have the freedom to rethink these concepts, we will regain our own freedom and recognize reflexively, pratyavamarsa, we will recognize reflexively our own spontaneity, our own pure luminosity, prakasha and vimarsa. And that is the samarasya, or mingling of prakasha and vimarsa, is what we find in the dialogue, Prashna and Uttara. That is how the Agamas are composed. Abhinavagupta, in his book, Paratrisika Vivarana, sees this question he does not even say there is the question and answer, Prashna. It's a questioning. What is the world? It's a constant dialogue. What is the unfolding of being? It's a constant questioning. Because within this very questioning lies realization. So it's not just a skeptical doubt. It's one healthy doubt that is integral to realization. And every mode of realization should take us to further questioning. And at that point, I should stop so that we could have more questioning. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mishra. So many ideas to ponder on, so many as you were speaking the last 50 minutes or so. The house is open now, isn't it?
Yeah.
And we'll have a concluding remarks later by the chair. So now we can indulge ourselves. You have a question?
Thank you, sir, for very insightful talk. Sir, in Law of Physics, it talks about chaos.
Yeah.
And here in Sanatana tradition, somehow extrapolate the Sanatana tradition, its freedom. With that, we compare that chaos with the freedom inherent within the Sanatana tradition. So, what you said, it brings lots of value, right? That there is an order inherent in the freedom. So, in the same way, can we say that the primordial concept of sacred, it also comes from the order, nevertheless of a different kind of order. So it's not chaos in that sense. We have this propensity to compare to Sanatana with the religious paradigms, and then when it doesn't fit in, then we call the term chaos from what we talked about in Taoism. So would you like to talk some more about that?
So, what we are, I don't know if I understand that idea clearly, but at least what I grasp right now, and we can argue further, is this manifestation of humanity, an anthropomorphic expression, is the order, and any other modes of becoming is chaos. You see how anthropocentric and problematic the very idea is? So, there's always an order for the specific mode of expression. So, you want milk, then yogurt is a chaos. But if you want yogurt, then the state of milk is not the goal. You need just that as a potential, like without milk you could not get yogurt. So although you are not interested in milk, but you have that milk. So every causal factor is what has led us possible. Those causal factors in their own causal conditions, I do not consider that even as chaos. Everything is as perfect as it ever can be. Or if we think in the sense of the chaos, now I'm just taking liberty, taking too far, that's what we do. And say being human is the most chaotic thing actually. We do the most chaotic thing in the nature. So the order, what we are calling the order as our expression, seems to be the most disorderly thing in the natural process. We are disrupting the process of the nature to unfold. We are taking in our own hands evolutionary processes. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, how physics is a good introductory book by Fritz Kopper. I'm sure you know that. Thank you.
There is a Nyaya Sutra. It says, Avyavasthatmani vyavasthitatvad avyavasthaya. Avyavasthatmani vyavasthitatvad avyavasthaya.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I wanted all of you to ask questions. That's why I stopped a little early, because yesterday I said everybody comes with a question. I hope you actually did come with a question. So that's the only way. Yes, sir. So I think the mic, we follow that.
There was some discussion on time and dynamism. So there is this concept in Bergson, like cinematographic intellect, and this is in sort of against this proprietary tradition of Pratibha in some sense. Pratibha is akhanda. There is non-successiveness, there is spontaneousness, and there is this static movement of this self-immediacy. So when you draw a lot from this Abhinav Gupta or all other people who talk about self-immediacy, and self-immediacy and the concepts are somewhat static in nature. How dynamism now would be built upon this, and how would this accommodate it? Would it negate it? And would that negation itself would lead to something, another static thing, like replacing the dynamic being? It's like replacing the Advaitic being with dynamic being. So how this self-immediacy part comes out, because every conceptual category or these concepts which you use to build upon are inherently of the static ontology or like brotherly or every other.
By accepting self-enclosedness of succession within simultaneity. How I would explain? By reading Utpaladeva. Ya Chaisha Pratibha Tattat Padartha Kramarushita Akramananta Chitrupaha Pramata Sa Maheshwara. Ya Chaisha Pratibha. This Pratibha, where is this Pratibha residing? Self-intuitive manifestation, shining forth. Is Padartha Kramarushita. Is so within the very order of Padartha. Both ways. The meaning of the word or all that exists. So you can give the linguistic explanation or metaphysical explanation. Akrama Ananda Chidrupa Pramata. So in what lies within this, because this Pratibha is the very expression of Maheshwara. There is no clear separation between Shiva and Shakti, or Shakti and Shaktiman. Akrama Ananta Chidrupa Pramata, so the subject, this as a singularity, as a synthesis of all modes of cognition. So the Akrama Ananta Chidrupa Pramata, so Maheshwara. So this subject that lies within you, that weaves within itself the past and the present. Because otherwise there is no Pratibha Jnana. and in absence of pratyabhigyana, there is no subjectivity. Meaning, if you are not able to weave within yourself, within the horizon of your experience, the past and the present, you would not have the right of subjectivity. When the past unfolds within itself and your within presence penetrates, and then that is when you have the idea of past and the present being a singular entity. When the consciousness manifests that way, you are conscious subject, you are pramata, you are the cognizing subject. Where lies the totality, where lies the synthesis of all the modes of temporality squeezed within this singularity, and that is why you are the Supreme Lord. So that is basically where I would see a synthesis of succession. Because and then where is he getting this idea from? Actually from Somananda. Somananda already conceives of succession within Paramashiva, the absolute. He's not even saying that the transcendent has no such, because the very will, you cannot conceive of Paramashiva lacking will. If Paramashiva lacks will, then there would not be 36 categories coming into being. There would be no desire. But if Paramashiva is intrinsically woven with the power to will, then to will is to act. To have desire is in itself to act. When I want, wanting is an action. Kriya. Kriya, the Ichha Shakti is not separate. You cannot separate Kriya from Ichha. And also Jnana. That's why the triadic structure resides all the same. And that is where I would have to go and derive from. Succession and simultaneous kinetic stop making sense there, because it's one requires the next, basically, or within one resides the other. Thank you. So could you pass the mic there? I need to hear. Please be loud.
Thank you, Professor, for that talk. And it's very refreshing to see talks on Tantrika, Shaivism in this center. And I'm a PhD scholar here. I'm doing my research on different Shaivism. I your books have really helped me, especially on imagination and visualization, and the way you write about the body also. So. My question was, it was really interesting that you brought in Deleuze in Bergson here. When Deleuze talks about difference, the internal difference that he borrows from Bergson, and how that's an intensity in the being. So being is already different. It's difference itself that is being, right?
Yeah.
So, and now I would like to come to Trigger Shaivism. I'm trying to understand the body in my thesis, which is very difficult because it talks about the body on different levels. So in Camouflage talks about the extensible body and body in cosmology, right? And how, like, in Shaivism there are different bhuvanas, and according to every bhuvana there is a separate body. So how consciousness manifests is with respect to that bhuvana. So as you rightly pointed out, you can only have an experience of subjectivity if you have a body in the first place, right? So and in my research, I'm trying to look into phenomenology, like, and that's where phenomenology stops. Like, quantity stops there. Like when it talks about invisible, visible, and how the seer and the seen comes at the same time, like so subjectivity, objectivity. But can we have an alternate method to maybe study, for example, practices in Vigyan Bhaira, right? And what sort of method can you adopt to study such practices? And I'm having trouble in understanding. Yeah.
I'm glad you are interested in images. And one thing that why after working on philosophy of consciousness, I took my attention out of it and started writing books on tantric images, was not just simply out of having fun, but observing that there is sheer lack of reflection or philosophy of image. And there's just like Roberto Palazzo, I think in one book, it starts the very first paragraph of the distinction between the Occidental and the Oriental is where the Oriental thinks through images, Occidental only thinks through words. And that shocked me, actually, that, throughout Oriental culture, images mean something. And meaning, so there is some kind of thinking process happening and expressed in the lived embodied words. So every deity dancing or sitting or whatever they are doing, carrying hundreds of weapons or theirs and things. So there is this kind of book that we can decipher. And so that to me in itself was a different way or different type of reflection than naturally we would do by reading more books and footnotes and every single thing. That just appreciating something aesthetically. Within that is also a process of learning. But would that help us with our dissertation? Just to get an intuition, it would, but not beyond that. Then we will still have to adopt the same analytical process to get through our dissertation, to get through our thesis. So I would not I would not say if you go to this mode of shunya, what the Vijnana Vairava says. We could come out with a big dissertation in itself. Ultimately, we need, this is the propensity of concepts, and that is what we need to live by, the propensity of concepts. But to have an anchor to transcend the conceptual horizon, I think would give us better teleology of why we are even trying to do these things. Because I just, a little scattered thought, but before we were seriously talking something, I gave an example of an American professor who donated all his books the next day of his retirement. And I was asking if Professor, Sachchidanand is also thinking the same way, because, I'll just take it on me. So, why there is a categorical difference between you yourself infused with your action versus you as a distant subject and carrying out the action. Like if you are, in the morgue, like you have a job and, preparing the body, and then it would be actually creepy if you continue to do in whatever the way after you retire from the work. I would say that's a form of sickness, But we doing philosophy, I hope, is not the same as someone working in the work. So that is why to live with the teleology, I think this is what we will get by texts like Vijnana Vairava. And then the job of the words will still remain there, for which we need to do the whole analytical process that I'm not saying we should transcend. Thank you. So, could you keep the mic back?
Thank you, Professor. I'm doing my PhD in Sanskrit Center in JNU for now, and my question is you mentioned about pure dynamism in your book. What is the difference between dynamism and pure dynamism? I'm a little confused in that because dynamism refers to vimarsha and spanda, that vibration. But at the same time, it reminds me of the pure consciousness in Advaita Vedanta. But it's more that-wise, nishkriya. So in that sense, I'm a little confused what is the meaning of the pure dynamism.
I use not as carefully as you are reading. So sometimes I may be just simply using dynamism, other time pure dynamism. You are reading more carefully than I should as a writer, first of all, confession there. But what do I mean is there is one dynamism that we grasp, and that is another dynamism that lies within, that is not grasped, that's not an object to be grasped, that is beneath the fabric of the being that constitutes our subjectivity, that constitutes the subjectivity of Paramashiva itself. So that pure dynamism lies only within Paramashiva, meaning it's not expressed in any categorical sense. It resides only in the form of being is willing. Being is just seeing. That is what I was reading Bhati Prapancha actually yesterday. I mentioned that Nahi Drashtur Drishte Viparilopo Asti, that Drishti seeing, and then this Shatri he explains is a constant gaze rather than a passive seeing as a noun, and that is a philosophical gap between Shankaracharya and the other philosophers like Bhati Prapancha or Abhinavagupta, because for Abhinavagupta, consciousness cannot be bereft of being conscious. There is the action, Kriya Shakti within. What does it mean to even have consciousness and lack to be conscious? And then, but it would require when there is the need for action, then it would require dichotomy, objectivity, and that's good. That is the whole teleology of creation. Otherwise, why would Paramashiva ever need this manifoldness? So this very consciousness has the urge towards self-differentiation. And that self-differentiation is what allows it to see things within himself as object outside, like other. Thank you.
There is that Devasya Swabhavoyam.
After Kamasya Kaspriha Gaudapada. Devasya is a Swabhava. He cites one position of Swabhavavada, and then immediately there is no other spriya or will of one who has attained after Kama, all the desires. And then this desire is viewed in a very objective sense there, like to desire a woman or to desire money. But what these guys are saying is the very desiring as intrinsic to being. How can you lack the desire to be? Consciousness is, and within that is, within that being, lies the desire to be. It can never be separated. That is the way these guys are thinking, not my philosophy. He can correct. Is my guru? He's free. I already worship them. They cannot even reject. It's a Guru Purnima. I was so lucky.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. It's wonderful. Always a pleasure to listen to you. Many new things come up in your exposition. I was just thinking of another Shakti. It is called Abohan Shakti. So, in the context of expression or successive expression, or to make a kind of differentiation. So that is equally important in expression, that how one thing is different from another. That is Abohan. So how do you see, because Shivra also has a sutra, Annaha Rup Rahi Grahak Veda. So this difference which we see, how do we approach this? Because we have three kinds of differences in Sogat Sanati and Vijati. Which kind of difference is most suitable in this context? Between Aham and Idam, between various ontological elements expressed in succession from Mishra to you. So, what kind of difference we can posit here in the context of Kashmir? Is it Sogat difference, Sogat Sanati or Vijati? Which would be more appropriate in this context?
That's very, he's taking me to the League of Nyaya, and there's a Umayata Pasharot. You know the phrase? There's a trap both ways. So I follow one and then I'll fall in one trap. I follow the next, I'll fall in another trap. But anyway, this is a fun game to do in Shastras. In the Bhagavad Gita, the entire Kashmir Shaivism is taught where the Lord said, Mantaha Smriti Jnanam Apohanam Cha. Through me, unfold these threefold potencies of memory, of cognition, and of apohana, negation. And these three are powers in this sense. To remember, but they are also interpenetrating, although they are considered separate categories, because you cannot have memories without some of order. You could not remember every single thing. You have to negate so much to remember one thing. The cognition, there is also negation. You have to negate everything. And particularly if you are the Buddhist, even to know this is my tea, I have to negate everything else in the world, and it may take eternity. So I'm just making a bad joke on this, by the way. So I hope you got that. So, but anyway, there is a cognitive process of negation integral to every mode of cognition. So what type of negation? What is self-negation here? Why this self-negation I'm considering as a primacy is without Shiva negating itself, himself, whatever you like to say, there is no objectivity, there is no other. Every time I need to negate my totality, every sense of the other is arising in the field bestowed upon by the self willing to shrink its own horizon. Otherwise, the self experiences all containing. Like an infant, when there is no rise of the I am, there is just this singular thing. That's why there's not a clear-cut ego we could locate to. But how far does it go? Sakala Vijnana, Kala Pralaya, Kala Mantra Mantreshwara, Mantra Maheshwara, Paramabrahmatita, Paramashiva. This is the sevenfold subjectivity that Abhinava Gupta provides. That is where we see a successive course of negation by means of which that's a singular, all-encompassing, pure luminosity attends this body, calls himself Sthaneshwar, and confronts if there is one extra H in the name, and so becomes so small, and then slowly liberates oneself from the concepts, from whatever so on, and then ultimately Nira Samsa Purna Ahamiti Pura Pasayatiya Dishakha Mashaste Tadanucha Vibhantam Nijakalam Swarupadunmesha Prasarana Nimesha Sthiti Jusha Tadatvaikam Bande Paramashiva Saktatma Nikila. So this Mira Samsa Purna, this is all-encompassing singularity. Aham iti, yet what manifests as I am, that has to assume twofoldness as being Prakasha and Vimarsa. And then when there arises the primacy of will, a primacy of action, a primacy of cognition, and then these lower modes of subjectivity start arising. And then when it becomes spatio-temporally bound within flesh, becomes a sakala subject. So these niyati kala kala. So these the limiting factors of temporality and then all the determining factors, conjugates, like seeds. So that is I would go to Abohana negation as a mode of self-negation, and that is how is that working also in the case of Iran. He is the master on that. He had, you already got Vivek commentary?
Yeah.
It's already. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So he has worked on it. So in this, what we would say is, how am I manifesting? How is my subjectivity appearing? How am I cognizing objects? Or even in erroneous cognition, when I'm cognizing a rope as a snake, how is cognition functioning? We say is through incomplete manifestation, apurnata khati. So when there is a purnata khati, there is singularity. There is no overblame. This is fun too. So what we are saying, this is a miserable trap. No. Why would the singularity ever want to attain this manifoldness if just to be miserable? But within this miserableness lies the possibility of recognizing each other's, recognizing ourselves, enjoying tea if that's good, or feeling bad if not so good. This being in the world, this is where apurnata khati, the incompleteness can arise. But there is still a manifestation of consciousness in every mode of consciousness. And then there's almost like provocators, almost like provocators. Because it's not completely wrong. There is some consciousness there. So there is some luminosity. When you see a snake on a rope, you can't say you didn't see anything. You saw something. You didn't identify it correctly. So there is a sense of something, and to that extent you are right. You saw something. So you can't say, because instead of a rope, I saw a snake, therefore I didn't see a thing. You did still see a thing. Okay, thank you. Yeah. Okay, could you pass the mic there?
Professor, I'm very curious to know how the metaphysics of Kashmir that you taught us in these 2 days. How do we explore morality, and especially empirical morality within this framework? I'm very curious to know about how the metaphysics extends itself to morality in the context of relativism, cultural, epistemic, and so. How does this metaphysical framework, which is quite open in itself, which embraces contemporary science as well and the ancient metaphysics as well, how are we also exploring morality and the contemporary moral problems that we are also facing? How do we go about it?
I don't think we have any absolute philosophy of morality in the world, but I think that ecosystem can give us a fair understanding than the absolutistic positions, because where is the sense of what is right coming from? In the process of the unfolding of the self, now incorporate the entire processes of incorporating the body, coming into body. Me assuming this body is rejecting that body. Me governing this space is rejecting that apohana of that the space that your body is occupying. And my sense of morality is an unfolding of the freedom that is required for the existence of the space that occupy within this body. And now let's extend the body from the flesh to my own subjective body, my subject body. Meaning, I also have little space of what I believe I am, and what I believe I am needs to be preserved for me to maintain my social existence, my intersubjectivity. If you try to erase my subjectivity, I would find that as offensive as if you try to erase my physicality. And then all these conceptual battles start right there because there is no actual subjectivity in the flesh alone. The subjectivity is deeper than the subjectivity found in the flesh. So my subjectivity incorporates my culture. My subjectivity incorporates my own linguistic horizons, my upbringing, so many factors. And then there is the subtlety because how would you be aware of the horizons of my subjectivity that are not given as the flesh? The flesh is manifest objectively out there. Subject is not manifest objectively as vividly as the flesh. And that is where we need to start negotiating. We both need to exist in the negotiated subjective space. You being a female, your femininity exists within the realm of the way you like to define your own feminine subjectivity, given that that subjectivity is also a dialogical product. That's why I said this Prashna and Uttara, between Prakasha and Vimarsa, between Shiva and Shakti. There is this dialogical space that Shiva is constantly trying to create. And is there like almost like in yin and yang, there is like is there trying to overlap another? Yes. You could use that almost in Marx's terminology of an overlapping or stepping up beyond one's horizon. But they try to balance each other's fair. They interpenetrate. Rather, the negate is not as much, but interpenetrate. Meaning, my own subjective space is not always dichotomously erasing your own subjective space. We live in this merged subjective space, subjective horizon, where your subjectivity and my subjectivity co-create each other. Only when there are like some situations then my own subjectivity pushes the boundary beyond and you confront. No, wait a minute. You are offending me. You can't say that. So these moralities, there's the sense of morality is a field of negotiation. It's a dialogue, and that's constantly unfolding. But the dialogue is not between two subjects alone. The dialogue is also an evolutionary process. Our very evolution is a dialogue between nature and our culture. So that is where the first negotiation of the sense of morality arises from. Our altruism, our capacity to transcend our own personal interests are also to be taken into account for, because it's not that only the self-interest, self-preservation is the only guide, because that's where the culture comes, and we can act as a compassionate being, we can act as an altruistic being, and these are the factors from within culture that sometimes triumph over what is biologically open for the preservation of the body. As a human subject, we transcend the flesh. And that is where our subjectivity seeks our sense of morality beyond what the physical space governs. And that is where the predominantly the philosophies of morality given from the Western world trying to negotiate each other as objects fail, because they do not recognize this like dialogically being constituted fluid fields and then altruistically woven cultural fabrics within objectivity. Those aspects are not taken into account fully. That's what I mean. Thank you so much.
So, I think with concluding remarks, I should complete one question. Okay, thank you. Last.
Thank you, sir. So my question is regarding the Vaishnava tradition. So in Vaishnava tradition, Shakti is primarily divided into three parts: Sandhini, Sambit, and Ahladi. So how this tradition, what are the similarities and dissimilarities between Shakti in various traditions of Hinduism?
You said the threefold Shakti, in which the last one, I had read the categories, but Aladiri, the one who gives joy, I have no problem with that. They just giving another name. Ananda Shakti, integral to being, would be, I would consider Aladiri Shakti. So the sense of joy, I find that at the core within Trika. Maybe I'm just going to pick on that last word because, I wish so much I would have said Jayanti, Jagadananda, Vipaksha Kshama, Paramesha Mukul Jnana Chandra Marichaya. This whole philosophy is the philosophy of joy. And I have like maybe 20 hours of discourse on this verse, this Jayanti, Jagadananda, Vipaksha Kshama. You can find that in the master. These are not categorically different. They might have some different interpretations, but they can completely accommodate each other to somehow.
One, please.
Yeah, okay.
This one is last.
Yeah, okay, the mic comes here and then we take it to, it goes to Sachchidanand, Parabrahma.
For the dynamicity, for the dynamic being, also for the spontaneity of the being, you are articulating that the one argument from Sankhya philosophy that what is the material cause and whatever is the basis or the material cause for what is apparent cannot be diametrically different from what is apparent. So what I understand from this is that the being is dynamic. So the world is like Jada Padartha, the object. So from the center and the periphery framework.
Yeah,
The center is static and the periphery is dynamic. So if the center is static, how can it is possible for periphery to be dynamic? Right.
Mathematical good question. You see, center and periphery are co-constituted. Without the periphery, there is no center. Without the center, there is no periphery. So, what happens is, whatever is constituting the center does not exist in reality. It is the periphery. The forces within the periphery pushed it together that constitutes what is the center. What is Shiva? Bhavati Shiva, Hoi Shiva Rama, Parama Sachchanda, Vaniya Ujjama Rupo, Hoi Shiva Rama, Parama Sachchanda. So this is the Shakti, the Sahasra, Ananta Shakti Sanghatta. That is where Vaishwarananda comes. What is Shiva? Shiva is the coming together of infinite forces. So that the center is always determined by the periphery. Do not ever let the center teach you do not exist. It is always in the history of humanity that the periphery is determining the center and not other way around. And that's what happens also in the body. In the field, when it starts coagulating, and then some kind of external forces end up creating a sense of the center of gravity. There's no real center of gravity if you take out all these external forces. So always the power resides in the proletariat, if I have to use the word. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I think now I can speak a few minutes. Uh, the topic of this lecture series of 2 lectures, Dynamism of Being, Semantic Structure of Time and Freedom. So yesterday I could not attend the lecture. I was there only for a few minutes. And yesterday I had the opportunity to listen to Professor Timalsina sir. He is a great scholar who studied Indian philosophical text with gurus and also contributed so many ideas and so many books. As I understand the topic, it is a very central topic of Indian philosophical tradition. If I take this point from the Nyaya perspective, which is fortunately my own interest, I studied in the beginning Nyaya philosophy. And one teacher of mine told me once that who studies Nyaya actually doesn't do a Nyaya in the branch of philosophy. So, this is actually Nyaya teaching makes your mind something clear on some issues. So, let us examine the point of being or freedom from Nyaya perspective. Thereafter, we can move on this direction because all these non-dualist philosophies are actually counterintuitive. It is against our common sense. Our common sense tells us duality, plurality, and all these non-dualist philosophies propound a philosophy which negates duality. Therefore, it is called non-dualism. So, how there is a place for non-dualism, and how there could be one stepping stone from Nyaya perspective to this philosophy. Because whatever I have studied of Kashmir Shaiva Darshan, Kashmir Shaiva philosophy, in Advaita philosophy it is said that Sankhya philosophy is Pradhan Mantra. And for Kashmir Shaiva philosophy, for my understanding, Nyaya philosophy is Pradhan Mantra. Because wherever you study those texts, the arguments from Nyaya perspective which are coming, they are there and there is one answer to those questions, those problems, those issues. So if we examine the problem of being and also dynamism, in Nyaya philosophy there is no dynamism. There is only being. There is no becoming. Becoming is actually dynamism. Being is actually static. To say the knower himself is static. And in 3 stages, when the knower gets liberated, he doesn't know anything. He doesn't feel anything. He doesn't do anything. Therefore, there is a shloka. Varam vrindavane rande shrigavattam bhajamyam. Natu vaisheshikim muktim prarthayami janat. So that is the position of Nyaya philosophy, where when one is liberated, he is free from knowing, knowledge, free from desire, free from action. So purely static. Atman exists but doesn't do anything, doesn't know anything, doesn't feel anything, doesn't desire. So this type of freedom is not attractive at all. will be willing to acquire such a state where there is no distinction between a stone and a knower. Very beautifully, Srihar says, Muktaya Yashiratvaya Shastram Chesakesham Gautamam Tamavekshaiva Yathavitta. So, the founder of Nyaya philosophy is Gautam. And there is a meaning of Gautam. Go is a cow, bull. So, he takes this sloka. And he is willing to say that only a bull can say like that, not an intelligent being. So, for a Niyayika, freedom is always distinct. For a Niyayika's God, he cannot create this universe out of nothing. His freedom is restricted. He can create this world only joining the atoms. He cannot create this world out of nothing or out
like
of
a potter, like
like a potter.
Kumbhaka.
Yeah, Kumbhaka. Like a potter, he can create this world. So this freedom is very limited. And this type of freedom, if I take Kartritva, what is the idea of Kartritva? The Nayayikas have defined the idea of Kartritva, that there are three components: knowing, willing, and doing. It is said, Jnanajanya bhaved ichha, ichhajanya bhaved kriti. So, Jnanajanya bhaved ichha. One knows, thereafter there is a desire. And when there is a desire, thereafter there is a kriti. And this kriti should not be understood a kind of kriya, because there is no kriya possible in the Atman. Kriya is possible only in bhutas. No, not all bhutas, because there is one bhuta where kriya is not. Bhutas actually. There are 5 bhutas, murta dravyas, where kriya is possible. So the Nayayikas make a distinction between kriti and kriya. Kriti is actually a property, and kriya is an action. So there is a surely distinction between quality and action. And here, when we say that first there is an ordering, so this ordering is very much required when one is doing something. So it is not possible that one is doing at the same time acting, willing, and knowing. So knowledge, desire, and action, these three cannot happen simultaneously. There must be one ordering. So in this case of ordering, when we are thinking, this becomes actually there are different moments, and these different moments are not connected with each other. They are coming successively, one after another. So for an Nayayika, it is impossible to equate knowledge with kriya, knowledge with desire, because one is the cause, another is the effect, and cause and effect cannot be equated. And you can see, if one is willing to propound a philosophy of non-dualism, one has to answer all these questions. One has to remove these absurdities, these distinctions. Because if there is one question was asked here by Professor Mishra, there are three kinds of distinctions: Sajatiya, Vijatiya, and Swagataya. So when you are talking about Sajatiya Bhed, Vijatiya Bhed, and Swagataya, what type of Bhed is there? If there is any distinction or not. So here there is always Vijatiya Bhed. Vijati in the sense that knowledge is a different type of quality. However, it is a quality, but it is a different type of quality. There are so many knowledge cognitions. There are so many episodes of cognitions. There are so many desires, and there are so many causes. And these are distinct, these are different from one another. And for a Nayayika, it is hard to believe, hard to accept that there is any possibility of equating them. Because how it is possible to equate an action with a quality? Quality is something different, and action is something different. However, cognition and kriti, these two are qualities, but they also cannot be identical. They are different. And in order to make this philosophy, and all the non-dualist philosophies are somehow mystical, because one has to jump beyond our experimental world, beyond our empirical world. One has to go beyond our experiences, common experience. So here, this philosophy makes a unique case, because when the Nayayika's way is accepted, followed, there is no possibility of Parameshwar. The term is used there, Parameshwar, not Ishwar. Parameshwar. And Parameshwar, he doesn't need anything at all to create this world. This is the concept. And for a Nayayika, and if there is a very beautiful argument presented in Buddhist philosophical texts, that if something is to prove Kshanikavada, they argue that if one is samartha, it may create everything at the same time, because there is nothing which it should wait for. Without waiting, it should be able to create everything at the same time. And there is no satisfactory answer can be provided by the Nayayika. They provide one answer that there is no Sahakari Karana, there are no auxiliary causes, therefore the effect is not produced. But it doesn't satisfy the Buddhist mind. These Kashmiri Shaiva philosophers present a unique idea, because there is no distinction between knowing, willing, and doing. These three, because Jnana Kriya Shive Naikyat, Jnana and Kriya are actually identical with Shiva. If these two are identical, then there is no momentary distinction. There is no delay at all. There should not be, you can say, that if one is capable, why there is delay? Suppose I am an administrative officer and I get so many complaints that this fund is not released till now. When I examine, I find that a few days ago I have approved, but the fund is not released till now. So what is the authority? Because although you are willing to do, you have done your job, but the fund is not released. The work is not done. So if one is capable of doing and he is not doing, it is a contradiction. And if there is any delay, this contradiction cannot be avoided. And in order to solve this problem, these Kashmir philosophers introduced this very beautiful idea where there is no distinction between, there is no Hegel between knowing and doing. These two are identical. So at this level, they have removed this type of absurdity and they have presented a very beautiful idea of dynamism. And also, following this, there is a, I think, there is a development from Advaita Vedantic perspective, from Kashmir Shaiva perspective. Advaita Vedantic perspective is also a non-dualist philosophy. But there is no philosophy of becoming. That philosophy is of being philosophy. And therefore for them, Sankhya is a true opponent, the main opponent. And for this philosophy, Kashmir Shaiva philosophy, Nyaya is the main opponent. So, this philosophy presents a very unique idea where there is identity between Pramata, Prameya, Pramiti, and also Pramana. Because these four are basic categories for a Nayayika. And for these philosophers, Kashmir Shaiva philosophers, they examine the Nyaya position and they present this idea in a very beautiful way. So this philosophy becomes a philosophy of dynamism. Because cognition itself, as defined in Kashmir Shaiva philosophy, is not same as in Nyaya philosophy. Because in Nyaya philosophy, cognition is defined as a quality. But in Kashmir Shaiva philosophy, it is not a quality. And also it cannot be considered as an action even. So you can see there is a development from Advaitic perspective and going to Nyaya perspective. This philosophy is evolved, and I think at present time this philosophy needs a very thorough understanding, and Professor Timalsina like scholars are very there, and it was our great opportunity to listening him here. And without taking much time, I would like to complete my talk. Thank you very much. And I would like to present my two books to Professor Timalsina. And this one.
This is the one I'm going to read first.
And this one is a book by Professor P.K. Mukhopadhyay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a good session. I will put in a day. If your mind is not too Europeanized and still believe in good luck to all. And there is a beautiful comment by Professor Arindam Chakravarti often says this. He is an authority, so I'm quoting. The kind of rigorous dialogical process that is available in Indian Sanskrit text, the kind of intensity of the discussions is not matched by the Vienna Circle discussions. These are far more advanced and intense. This is Professor Arindam Chakravarti, who is an authority on both the analytic world and the Sanskritic world. And he keeps on saying that students must be exposed to the original Sanskrit works, the rigor the vitality of the schools, whether it is Avyanyaya, Nyaya, Vedanta, or Ashwarya. If even a couple of you are inspired by that kind of work, what you were exposed to last couple of days, and pick up any of the schools of Indian philosophy and land in storybooks, I will be the happiest. We are more interested in practical, things rather than metaphysical discussions. So catch hold of the professor, that he is available, and hope we can welcome the MOU with the storybooks and JNU. That should be another agenda. An exchange
Yeah,
with
that's
other
a-
thing.
yeah.
We can explore.
I would love to explore.
Yeah,
I'm not an
and,
administrator.
A couple of our kids land at storybooks and earn in dollars. That's what makes me realistic and more interested in all that. Okay, the rest follows. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, and a high tea, really high. And for the students outside, but for faculty, please, we would be served here coffee and something for us. Faculty would stay in the hall, and the students would enjoy the corridor. One more coffee or tea, and then the food that is available. Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor.
Where am I included? Where am I included?
You are member secretary, another hall, Gandhi's hall.